But as it relates to the election, Mr. Borg, do you think we are within our purview from an agenda perspective, given the sort of emergency nature of that election scheduled for April 7th? We're not actually scheduled to meet again until April 13th. My question for you, is that a topic we could take up right now and have a vote to postpone to a date to be confirmed?
Through you, Council President, I would say that you could take up an emergency item as this information broke after, just as this meeting was getting ready to launch, as you have no scheduled meeting before that, and then have the language specifically state contingent upon state guidance and being in compliance with that to postpone.
Okay. Question, Mr. Lennox, from a rules perspective, do we need to take a vote of any kind on that from our rules, or can I just hold it for a minute? I'll allow councilors to ask questions and then take the agenda item up.
I don't think we have any rule in regards to that as of yet. So I think if you were to have a motion made and go forward with that, I think that would be fine with the contingencies laid out by the town manager.
Okay, so let's do this. If it pleases the council, I will come back to your questions, but I do think for the sake of people who are in campaigns and the public who's planning their schedule for voting, and the fact that our next meeting isn't scheduled for the 13th, that if we could, let's take this topic up right now. I'd say first, does anybody have any questions about the change or the guidance that came down from the state, or any opposition to postponing the election? If you could, what I'd say to keep the meeting, if you could just signal with your hand, then I'll know who to yield the floor to. Mr. Scanlon.
Just a technical question. None of the absentee ballots have been prepared or sent out or anything like that for this election?
That's to you, Mr. Borg. You're on mute.
We have just received the absentee ballot today. None of the other ballots have been received.
Okay.
Ms. Boyce?
Since if we haven't done the absentee voting yet, I don't think there would be any issue. As far as how I feel, I'm okay with postponing it. I think we should postpone it.
Okay. Mr. Borg, people who are currently sitting in office, I assume their terms would just continue through to the new election date?
Through you, Council President, that is correct. Any incumbent elected official whose term would have expired at a municipal annual town election, or if that election was not postponed pursuant to this act, shall continue to serve in that official position until a successor is elected and qualified.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Pare?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the back end of this. So first off, obviously, there's no way an election could happen in a safe way, before the next meeting. But as far as choosing a date for the actual election prior to June 30th, part of me doesn't really like having an open-ended, measure here where we cancel the election, we don't reschedule the election itself. Just throwing that out there for consideration. It's probably premature to pick a date at this point for the election to be rescheduled to, but at least if we kind of agree that we'll bring this back up again very, very soon at our next meeting or as appropriate, so that we can get that rescheduled in short order.
Yeah, my thought, tell me if this resonates with people, is that we'd have elections through you, of course, Mr. Borg, come to us at our next meeting, currently scheduled for the 13th, and provide a recommendation on the execution of the election. I think that would give us two advantages. One, we'd have their view and two, it would give a couple more weeks to come off the calendar, and hopefully they can make a more educated assumption on when we think we could safely hold an election.
Council President, through you, absolutely, we can have that. We can tee that up for an agenda item and have the elections personnel come in and provide the council with all the necessary information within a potential date proposal when all of this could happen.
Okay, it's a good point, Mr. Parr. Thank you. Ms. Boyce.
Yes, I have a question for the, through you, Keith, for our town manager. You stated the 20 days, like we have to vote on the date 20 days before the new date of that of election. So if when we decide the new date, does it have to be 20 days before, or can we decide what date it's going to be and then we wait, we vote on it later for the 20 days prior? Is that?
Okay, Council President, through you, this is the draft language that I received. The vote on the new election date must be done 20 days before the new election date. That's what we have verbatim. So I would propose that at the next meeting on 13 April that we select a date that's at least 20 days away from that meeting. And you could safely pick a time in May or early June to suffice that requirement.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I just didn't know, like, say we kind of have say we were going to do it in June. We're going to have our meeting in April, so I didn't know, would that be too soon, or that was what I was just thinking.
Okay. Well, let's see what elections recommends. I agree with I think kind of the direction of what Mr. Parra was saying, that to the extent we can get that date on the books as soon as possible and not have kind of this open-ended situation is in our advantage. But I also think we're all cognizant of the fact that we really have no idea where the end line of this marathon is.
Yeah.
So,
Agreed.
it might, and who knows, I mean, we might pick a date and it might require a revisit after that, but maybe we pick a starting point. But let's get the advice of elections. I'm sure they'll have a little bit of time to digest what came out this afternoon, and will be able to give us appropriate guidance on the 13th. Okay. Any other comments or feedback? Otherwise, I'll look for a motion. All right, Mr. Parra?
I was going to make a motion, but also a question first, just so I get the motion correct. Through you, Keith, Mr. LaPointe. Who is the authority that issued the guidance from the state? Is it good enough to say the state, or was it Department of Elections, or?
It's through the Elections Division.
Elections Division. Okay, thank you. So in that case, it's okay. I move to postpone the April 7th, or I move to approve the postponement of the April 7th, 2020 town election per the guidance of the Massachusetts Elections Division from the state to be rescheduled at soonest possible date.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second from Ms. Cathcart, I think is what we got.
Yes.
Good, thank you. Let me just think for a second.
Were there any asterisks there that I should have added?
I was just thinking. I don't think so. Mr. Borg, would that motion suffice?
Council President, through you, I would just add contingent upon, state guidance and language from the legislature on the postponement.
Okay. Do you want to amend your motion?
So amended.
Second.
Excellent. Second from Ms. Cathcart again. All right. So we will. Is there any further? Just have a motion, a second. Any further discussion on this? Okay. Hearing none, I'll take it to a vote. Again, this is a roll call vote. Mr. Scanlon.
Yes.
Mr. Scanlon votes yes. Mr. Parra.
Yes.
Mr. Parra votes yes. Mr. Lennox.
Yes.
Mr. Lennox votes yes. Ms. Prescott.
Yes.
Ms. Prescott votes yes. Mr. Gregory?
Yes.
Mr. Gregory votes yes. Mr. Simmons?
Yes.
Mr. Simmons votes yes. Ms. Cathcart?
Yes.
Ms. Cathcart votes yes. Ms. Boyce?
Yes.
Boyce votes yes, and I, President Keith LaPointe, vote yes. So that's 9-0. Election is postponed. Can we just make sure that any active candidates get advised of this, as well as media outlets and the website and everything? And just, I think we need to make sure that we highlight the fact that it's our intention to meet with elections on the 13th and agree on a date as soon as possible.
Council President, through you, absolutely, we'll make sure that happens.